Kia ora koutou. I'm using a different microphone. Can someone just give me a thumbs up to make sure that this is working okay? Oh, great. Thanks, Anna. So just while we're waiting for a few others to join us, there's about 16 people here so far. I just thought I'd apologise. A few of you have let me know that there was high-pitched noise in the first recording. So I have had a go at changing out a few things around my office space that I'm hoping has dealt with that. So there was a new base unit for our landline, and my made sure that my main laptop was, my main desktop was turned off. And I've swapped out the microphone that I'm using here in case it was connected to that. Can people just let me know whether the recording last night, the one that I released last night for today's session, did that have that high-pitched noise on it as well or not?
Yeah, it sounded like you were making tea.
Ah, damn. Okay, I'm really sorry about that. I'll have another go at seeing what else is there. You can't hear that noise at the moment though when I'm in this session, can you?
Nah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll have another go and see if I can figure that out. So apologies for that, because it's bad enough being in this online stuff without that kind of thing going on in the background. So I'm not sure what that is. So I'll have another go at seeing if I can figure that out. And the second apology from me is the quality of my voice. So I just thought I'd let you know that I've had a really bad run of asthma over the last few weeks. And so I've upped my asthma pre-medication, and that's playing a bit of havoc with my voice. So that's the steroids I'm taking. So I'm sorry my voice is a little bit, you know, it's not as deep and resonant as usually it is. So sorry about that, but I think you can still hear me all right in terms of speaking. Okay, so we've got a little more than half the class here so far. So, and a few people are still joining us. So I just thought I'd introduce the session while people are still coming in. So there's two main things I want to do today. So firstly, following up on the pre-recorded lecture 2, content about project management and project planning. So I just wanted to pull a few threads of that across into the expectations of this course. What does that material mean in terms of what you're going to be doing next over the next couple of months? And then secondly, move on to talk a little bit more about what some of the literature tells us about working in teams. And then again, draw some links between what does that literature say and what does it mean for what you're going to be moving forward into within your small groups. So, so I've got about 3/4 of the class here now, so I'll jump into that. Just move across to my shared screen. That didn't like me moving across there, so let me just do that once more. There we go. Okay, so we've got about 60 of 77 here, so that's not too bad, I think. So let's jump into this session. So just from my brief intro before, we'll just pull out some threads from the project management and project planning and how it connects with this course, and then working in teams. So in the schematic to map out a common funding process that happens out there in the health sector that you will very likely encounter within your first year being in the workforce. So it's most commonly called the request for proposals, and it begins with this establishment of need, the request for proposal process itself, the further details requested, and then the contracting process and a detailed plan. So I just wanted to signal to you where your work in this course fits into this common process. So I do actually establish a simulated request for proposal process that will be introduced next week. So next week I'll put on the hat of being a funder, I'll announce this request for a proposal, I'll share it with you, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion in the workshop. So just at this stage, signalling that you will be working in your small groups of mostly 4, some groups of 3, of actually crafting a project proposal in response to the request for proposals that I announce next week. And to move towards that group work activity of the project proposal that you are going to be crafting is the next individual assignment, which I'm tentatively calling a project scope. It's not exactly in the form of a project scope, but it will serve the function of you individually going and gathering some specific information in relation to the request for proposal and submitting that information in the form of a 1,000-word report. So you've got about 2 weeks to do that, well, literally 2 weeks to do that report from when I announce the topic. So it's really important between now and next week that you make sure you get assignment 1 out of the way, because you do not want to be applying for an extension and be working on assignment 1 and then having to start to work on assignment 2. You don't want that. You need to get assignment 1 out of the way. So that's the first point. And the second point is you need to be clear that you have made sense of what is this thing about needs assessment? Who are stakeholders? What is this stuff about local context? So definitely, if you haven't listened to the pre-recorded lecture that I released yesterday, then make sure you listen to that. And for those of you who want to be a little bit ahead of the game, you will probably find it really useful to follow up with some of the key readings that are in the course readings about needs assessment, stakeholders, and the importance of local context, and the reading by Guerin, G-U-E-R-I-N. So I encourage those who want to think ahead to jump into that work. So just reinforcing this idea that your first piece of work for assignment 2 is an individual assignment, and then you will find a way to pool your information with your group to be starting to move into your project proposal, which is the group assignment. And I will give you lots of prompts along the way over the next few weeks to enable you to do that. So just a reminder about where this fits in the assignment schematic of the course. So remember at the beginning I said on the left-hand side of the screen that what you bring and who you are is important for this course, possibly more so than any of your other courses, because it's about what your competencies and what your skills and what your knowledge are. And so the sooner you can gel with the people in your group so that you have some trust and respect, so that you can share with them what you are good at and what you are not so good at, then the sooner you as a group can decide, oh, okay, I can see, Fred, that you would be really good at doing this. So the rest of us in the group will let go of that to enable you to do that. So it's really important in this course that you don't see the individual work in your group as everybody is doing exactly the same. That's not how teams work in the workplace. Teams in the workplace work by identifying, I'm the person who's really good at asking questions, so I'll take over the role in the group of asking the hard questions. Or you're the person who's really good at researching information and pulling it in, so we will let go of that because you're really good at that. Or Sue, you're the person who's really good at presenting, so we will make sure that you are the person who represents the group in the presentations. Now, if Sue's going to be doing that, then you want to take a little bit off the pressure off Sue for some of the other things that is happening. So it's really important you keep these ideas in mind when you're thinking about how these assignments fit together. What you bring and who you are is important, and the sooner you can express that to your group, the better. The Qualtrics evaluation is important. It gives you this chance to actually start to critically reflect on what you're good at and what you want to continue to develop. So there's about 70 of you who have done the Qualtrics self-evaluation, about 7 or 8 of you who haven't finished it yet. Some of you haven't started. It's really important, those people who haven't done it, that you get onto that within the next day or two, because you will start to lean on that information more as we proceed forward. So assignment 1 due next week. We're going to workshop a little bit more in the workshop this afternoon and tomorrow, is starting to really get you thinking about this idea of competencies. And today I'm going to talk to you specifically about how some of those competencies in relation to teamwork connect with your work in the course. So assignment 2 is an individual piece of work. And I'll talk a little bit about how you'll be taking a slightly different focus within your group on who's picking up which aspect of assignment 2. And then you have to find a way to pull that information and collectively write one executive summary as your group and submit that 1 week after you hand in your individual assignments. In next week's workshop, we're going to workshop what is an executive summary and how do you write it and what is in it, so that you're really clear about that. So yeah, so just signaling, assignment 2 is still individual, but we're moving you really clearly into the group work, and I'm encouraging you to stay in touch with each other and talk to each other about the information you're gathering in assignment 2. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that next week. I just realized I don't have the chat function open. And I think someone might have asked a question. Oh, never mind, the sound is gone. Well, that's good. Whew. Okay, so that's a little bit of just where things are fitting together. So let's come back to the next slide. So just a few more comments about the assignment 2, which we'll be starting to move into from next week. What's really clear from the lecture I posted last night is that success of all projects is tied to really good initial scoping. And so what you're doing in assignment 2 is you're gathering a whole lot of background material to make sure that when your group is starting to think about your project proposal in a few weeks' time, that you've got the right kind of material at your fingertips to enable you to do that work. So although it's an individual assignment, I will encourage you from next week to make sure you are staying in touch with each other about key resources you're finding. And you might want to think, when you meet in your workshops today or tomorrow, you might want to think about how will we share information and resources we're finding with each other. So for example, some of you will find some really good websites in relation to the topic. Some of you will find some key reports that are summarizing things. Some of you will find things about local initiatives. And you want to make sure that even though you're writing your individual assignment about your particular topic, that the rest of your group knows about these resources and that it's helping to shape where you're moving towards as a group. So that's just kind of signaling where we're going. Okay, any questions about any of that so far? Okay, so for those of you who have read assignment 2 instructions, and I'm hoping that you will have done that by now. If you haven't, then you need to read those within the next day or so. You'll see that there are 4 topics, domains, I tend to call them domains, of assignment 2. And so these are particularly set up around groups of 4, which most of you are in. The groups of 3, you can decide which of these you're going to work with, and I will close the gap with the 4th topic with you by having an individual Zoom session with you. But basically, I'm talking to the groups of 4 primarily. So in your group of 4, one of you will pick up the thing that, for the purposes of the course, I'm calling needs assessment. And one of you will pick up what I'm calling in the course responses to the problem. And another person will pick up the stakeholder analysis. And the 4th person in the group will pick up the local contexts. So you'll all be working on the same topic, which I'll introduce next week, the RFP topic about a population health problem. But you'll be picking up a slightly different aspect of that problem. And so today and tomorrow when you meet in your workshop, you might want to start to explore who might naturally fit towards one of these. You don't have to lock yourself in this week, but just starting to think about it. And then once we move into the topic next week and explore some material that's out there about that topic, then you'll have to lock yourself into which people is going to pick up which aspects of this. So I do want you to make sure you've understood these aspects. In the pre-recorded lecture, I talked about needs assessment and stakeholder analysis as two big topics. For the course, I've split those out into 4 aspects, 4 domains. So the person in your group who picks up the needs assessment aspect, they will be researching what is the evidence base of this problem in the RFP, what's some clarity about the nature of the problem, who's affected by it, and why is responding to this problem significant, and what's known about the cause of the problem, and what the costs of the problem are, what the impacts are on communities and families. A second person in the group will be picking up the responses to the problem that have already been implemented. So they'll be overviewing, they'll be creating a bit of a picture of what is already being done to respond to this problem, particularly in Aotearoa, but it might be useful to have a quick scan of what is happening in other countries that might not have been happening here. So what's the evidence base of those previous responses? What's the nature of them? So for example, were they social marketing campaigns? Were they training packages? Were they education resources that were made available in schools or in communities? So what's the nature of those different variety of responses to this problem? And what information is known about whether any of these previous responses are successful? Have they worked for some groups but not for other groups? Is there anything known about that? Sometimes there is some information known, sometimes there isn't. And what might have been considered as a response to this problem but has never been done in this country? Or what lessons are there to be learned from all of those previous responses that could inform your thinking when your project team decides to respond to this problem? The third area is starting to make sense of the stakeholders. So this person will be drawing on some information that the others have discovered along the way, particularly the responses to the problem, and creating a little bit of a map, a little bit of a story of who are the people that are involved in this field. And the people who are doing this stakeholder analysis aspect, they really need to go back to the slides from the recorded lecture on who are stakeholders, who could be considered to be stakeholders. So this person is creating a little bit of a map of the potential stakeholders. What's their interest? Why might they be involved in some future proposal that is responding to this problem? And why would they be involved? And at what stage in the project development might they be involved? The fourth aspect or domain of this project scope is a person who's focusing on the local context. So this person is particularly paying attention to the kinds of things I talked about in the pre-recorded lecture about social institutions, who are the key people, what are the, who are the key, what's the history of this problem and responses to the problem in this local context, how this local history might be something that we need to pay attention to when we're starting to implement this particular project proposal. So for example, if you're thinking about responding to the problem in the Waikato region, then what's the nature of the Waikato region that you will need to take into account when you're going to develop a response to this problem? So this person out of the 4 different domains is also the person who will pick up the relevance of the treaty to this problem. So, so you need to think a little bit about those comments I made in the lecture about mana whenua, and perhaps also thinking about what this problem might have meant to mana whenua. Has it had a particular impact on them, and therefore could you argue that a treaty response to this problem would take you down a particular path in how you will respond to this problem? So those are the 4 areas. So I just want you to start to have that in the back of your mind, start to have a look at some of the key readings that are there, and be ready to jump into this in a little bit more detail next week once I've released the particular population health problem that your assignments are going to be based on. Now, are there any comments in relation to those 4 areas I've said so far?
Are we looking at the Treaty of Waitangi or Te Tiriti o Waitangi? Because they're two very...
Te Tiriti o Waitangi, please. Okay. So next week,
are all groups doing the same health problem, or are we all going to be assigned a different health problem?
No, all groups will be working on the same health problem this time. So sometimes I give half the class one topic and half the class another topic, but this year we're all going to be working on the same problem. Because there's quite a lot of diverse responses that can be made to this particular problem. So it's sufficient that you're all working on the same one. There's enough diversity for you to be working on the same one. Okay, good questions. So, so just reinforcing, I'll introduce the RFP topic next week in the form of a funder's request for proposals. You'll decide in your group who's going to be working in which of the domains. Reinforcing you groups of 3, I think there are now 3 groups of 3 left, that you can still decide which of you is going to pick up which of these 3 domains. And then I will meet with each of your groups independently and close the knowledge gap with some of the other areas so that you have an equivalent amount of knowledge to the groups of 4. And next week we'll workshop how to write an executive summary, what an executive summary is, and you'll think a little bit more about how you're sharing resources and how you're going to write your collective executive summary when we meet next week. Okay, so that's where we're going. So the next bit of today, I just want to talk a little bit more about working in teams. What is known from the literature about working in teams and some of the considerations that are really important for you to take on board as you work with your group over the next couple of months. So I've got a few comments about some links to competencies, particularly personal development and leadership. I'm going to talk to you about some common processes in teams, and then a little bit more about our ongoing engagement across the course. So the first set of comments I wanted to make is this, the characteristics of teams. Now, for those of you who have already done the self-directed learning activity for the workshop, you don't have to have done it yet because I give you a bit of space. I'm always trying to set up your self-directed learning activity that you can do it within the timetabled slot. So, one of the pieces of the self-directed learning activity is to watch a 13-minute video from this fascinating woman who did a TED talk, who talked about the notion of teaming. So I've given you a couple of tasks to listen out for in her TED talk, Professor Edmondson. So teaming is a relatively new part of the literature. More standard part of the literature is this notion of teamwork. So you'll hear her contrast a little bit about teamwork and teaming in that video. But I just wanted to make some comments about the characteristics of teams and teamwork. That teams are generally defined as a small number of people, and usually teams within the workplace, different team members are given different tasks, and the setup of the team enables those teams to work in a coordinated way with each other on these separate tasks. And so this is very much what I'm trying to set you up in your course by giving you 4 slightly different aspects to work on in the RFP, so that you are really becoming a little bit more knowledgeable than others in your aspect, so that you're required to find ways to coordinate your activities and your knowledge with each other. As teams work on their different tasks in a coordinated way, they develop a synergy across time, and this does not happen straight away. And I'll talk a little bit about developmental processes on the next slide. But over time, the team recognizes that they have got a common purpose and that they need to constantly work on developing their common purpose and maintaining their common purpose. And a really important focus on this is to developing your team contract, sometimes called a constitution, sometimes called your ground rules. So I'm giving you that opportunity today to really think about how will we find our common purpose in our small groups, and how will we continue to develop and maintain our common purpose to move towards completing the assignment work in this course. You need to teams need to develop a game plan. So they need to allocate tasks, establish timelines and milestones, find ways to come back together, to hold each other to account for the tasks and the timelines. And so this is often called a game plan. And I've given you some tips within the assignment 2 instructions and assignment 3 instructions about how you'll start to move towards that common game plan. And the 5th aspect of teams is that the control for teamwork is held from within. So you need to find ways to hold each other accountable for the common game plan that you're working on. And so these are all the things that I want you to think about when you're starting to draft your constitution or your ground rules or your contract with each other. These are the kinds of ways that teams operate within the workplace. Okay. So just to weave in a couple of connections here to the competencies. So within the Bachelor of Health Science competency framework, there is the odd competency that you might automatically go, oh yeah, that's about teamwork. And so when I've asked students this in the past, when we've been in a face-to-face classroom, I sometimes have a little bit more discussion about this. People will commonly say, oh yeah, 4.3 is the one Bachelor of Health Science competency that's about teamwork, because it clearly says build and enable respectful, sustainable, collaborative relationships. Oh yeah, that's teamwork. But I just want to draw your attention to some of the other competencies which also have really important connections to teamwork. So in the communication and engagement cluster, there is the other competency 4.2, where you have to demonstrate an understanding of yourself in relation to others. And you've got to think about reflecting on your own world viewpoint and how your world viewpoint is not the same as others. And so this is a really important way of operating as a part of a team, that you find ways to develop some cultural safety within your group. And for those of you whom this concept is new to, you might want to ask if other people in your group know about this idea of cultural safety, and how might cultural safety be a part of how you operate, and how might you develop really respectful relationships with each other, knowing that you communicate in different ways, that you come from different places, and that you see the world in different ways. So this is a really important part of teamwork. Another aspect of teamwork that's in your Bachelor of Health Science competencies comes under the social and environmental responsibilities, where it's really clear in here that you need to be developing your understanding of leadership and advocacy, and your understanding of social and civic responsibilities. And so somewhere along the way in your team, you might find that you need to step up and start to take the place of some leadership for a while to help your group navigate through a particular aspect of what you're doing. Now, there isn't necessarily a need for one person in your group to be allocated as the leader throughout the course, but you might find that people step into a role of leadership around particular things or topics or processes, and then they might step back, and then someone else might step up into a role of leadership. Often there'll be someone who's really good at doing timelines and milestones, and this will be the person who always hands in assignments in time. If it's due at midnight on a Monday, this will be the person that might hand it in at 8 a.m. on the Monday or the day before. So that person's probably a really good person to show a little bit of leadership around setting some of your tasks and timelines. 11:59, yes, that's right. 12 or 11:59. So some people pay attention to those minutes. Some people can work more within hours and be a little bit more forward thinking than the minutes leading up to the due date time. So just signaling, there's a time for people to step into and out of this role of leadership. And the final point on this page is this idea about navigating your personal and academic and professional challenges with integrity. So it's quite likely most groups will encounter some problem somewhere along the line. Someone didn't manage to do what they said they were going to do. Someone's been away sick. Someone's got pulled into some dilemmas with their family life. So how do you navigate these kinds of challenges that come up with integrity? So these are really important parts of teamwork. Someone may not have comment. What was it? Oh yeah, okay. Right. Okay. Another set of literature that I've got the full citation, I think, in the recorded lecture, talks about the sets of collaborative skills that are essential for effective teamwork. Now, you'll actually see some of these collaborative skills in a couple of your frameworks. Probably the framework that it is most apparent is the Canadian Interprofessional Collaborative Ways of Working framework. But you can also see some of these collaborative skills that are a part of teamwork in some of the other frameworks as well. Certainly they're visible in the World Health Organization framework as well. But I just wanted to flash them up in front of you and make sure that you're thinking about these when you're starting to think about your group's way of working with each other. That these kinds of skills of cooperation, assertiveness, responsibility, communication, autonomy, and coordination have been clearly identified as key competencies to be able to work as a part of a team. So it's really important for you to start to think about how you are developing these competencies as you are continuing to go through your group work over the next couple of months. And I guess a couple of points that I'd like to make. Number 2, about assertiveness, supporting one's own viewpoint with confidence. It's quite common for there to be at least one person in your group, and maybe more, who have been struggling with their competency and assertiveness, and they are really trying to find their feet. And so thinking about the ways that you as a small group can support one or more of your members who are trying to find their feet with assertiveness is a really, really important skill. And so there might be some leadership that you might be able to show to support the development of some assertiveness in one or more members of your group. And all of those other aspects are really significant as well. So I'm wanting you to make sure you read those and think about those. So just some final comments to kind of lead us towards wrapping up this session. I've given you some self-directed learning activity to get ready for the workshop activity. And part of that is starting to develop your contract or your guidelines or your constitution. So I have given you a couple of places where you can draw on some information about what you might document in there. So there's certainly some good things on the modules page, and I'm giving you a bit of time now to go in and have a look at that before the workshop. There's also some good things to think about more widely on the internet, so feel free to go a little bit more widely about that. And there is a short reading by Megan that hopefully is available on the reading list. I'll have to double check that. Megan, who talks about some key ideas about ground rules as well. But I just wanted to make some broad comments about those. In essence, you're documenting something now that will be a living document that you will come back to and reflect on and develop at a couple of times as we move forward. And to start with, you will want to document some of the things that you talked about in the exercise I gave you last week in workshop 1. What were some of those experiences from previous groups that you want to pull into this group that were really positive? And certainly draw on some of those resources on Canvas. In general, whatever you need to be productive in how to work together. Sometimes some groups find it really useful to go, let's identify some core values about how we want to operate with each other. And so if you have had any experience of working with values, I encourage you to think about maybe thinking about some core values about how you operate with each other. Some mechanical things like how often are you going to meet? How are you managing attendance? What expectations do you have on preparation for meetings? So, for example, you might decide once we've unpacked the topic of assignment 2 and you're starting to think about where you've got to go for doing your group work with assignment 3, how you've got to get ready to do your presentation. Someone's probably going to be doing a little bit of a timeline of what have we got to do by here, here, and here to be able to get there. So you might be making a commitment to meet outside of the workshop time. So I will give you some time in the workshops to work on your assignments. Like next week, we're working on the executive summary stuff. But most groups will find that they need to meet at least once outside of their workshop time to do follow-up activities, share information, develop next steps, do some writing together, those kinds of things. So you'll have to determine that, maybe have a guess now, and then reevaluate as we go through over the next couple of weeks. So how often might you meet? How will you meet? What kind of form will you use? Will you use Zoom or some other process? What happens if people don't turn up to meetings? What's the follow-up to that? If you're not going to turn up, if you can't make it, do people have to put in apologies? Who do they apologize to? Where do they put that? Are you going to have a process where someone takes notes or minutes or sets tasks? Where's that going to go, that stuff? Are you going to have a process where you want preparation to happen before? Who will set what preparation? So these are the kinds of things you might not know the answers this week, but you might be clearer about it next week and be even clearer the week after. So start with the fundamentals. Okay, so that's most of the things I want you to think about. And certainly you'll have a chance to look at some of the resources online. Okay, so that's most of what I wanted to cover, just joining together some threads of that pre-recorded lecture, what's expected in your assignment work, getting you start to think about some key ideas of working as a part of a group. So if you're in today's workshop, I've given you some time to prepare, having a look at the Professor Amy Edmondson's video and also having a look at some of those other resources. And just wanted to give you an opportunity for any final questions. Leave assignment 1 questions till the workshop time or the discussion page, but any other questions about the pre-recorded lecture or what I've said so far? I don't think we need this anymore, so let me see your faces. Okay, I don't think there's any questions. You might want to click, raise your hand if you've got anything, or chat. Okay. Thanks for that. Most of your groups are reasonably well set. There's the odd person that I've needed to move because of shifting to, people going to different workshop streams. The odd person's withdrawn from the course, the odd person's joined the course. So just double check. You should still be, most of you are in the same workshop stream, but the odd person has ended up moving. So just double check who's in which stream on your Canvas page. Okay, I'll see half of you at, what time did I decide? 3:45, and the other half of you I'll see tomorrow. Bye everyone. Oh, I forgot to give you a round of applause for joining me. Thank you. Bye.
Hey Andrew, sorry, I just thought of something now.
Okay.
You know the in slide number 9 for the previous recording that we just had,
Yeah.
we were going over requests for proposals, and there's a point at the bottom where you said, although not a contract, it is declaring intent and care is required. So that whole ethical thing of those that make the proposal have to actually make sure that what they say they can do, they can do.
Yeah.
And when you said that, like keeping promises, under liability, like and consequences, who does it fall on? For example, if like say you make all these promises and then the funder thinks, oh, okay, this is all good, and then they give you all this funding and say you can't keep up with what you promised, but you use all that money, like is there consequences for that? And do we have things in place to stop that from happening? Or is it only falling to, as the project progresses, you only give money bit by bit? But then again, there's also the thing of, in order for the project to progress, you need to take that lump sum of money.
Oh, kia ora, Jonah. That's a really good question. So, so there's a few different layers of that. So, at a purely kind of contractual level, once a funder decides your organisation, Jonah, is the one that we want to fund, then they actually go through a process called due diligence. Have you ever heard anyone talk about due diligence before?
Slightly.
Okay, so occasionally you'll hear it come up in relation to government activity as well. So whatever party is in opposition, they'll sometimes challenge government for going, you didn't do your due diligence about the contract with such and such. So, so basically what happens is lawyers and accountants within the funding organisation will do an investigation of Jonah's organisation and go, now who are they? What did they say in their annual report? So they'll really explore who you are and what you've done before, and whether there is any history of, oh crikey, you've overpromised and undelivered before. So they actually do a bit of research before they contract with you. So that's kind of the funder's protection mechanism.
Right. And that's assuming that you have a history.
Yeah, that's right. So if it's known, and then the second thing that funders will put in place in relation to protecting their investment is they will put some reporting requirements onto your organisation. So they'll often do something like quarterly reports. So especially if it's like a 1-year contract, they'll often require a meeting with your organisation 4 times through the year. And ask you, so in your detailed project plan, you said that you would be at, where are things? And often the funders who are good at what they do, they will be relationship building in those meetings. So they'll go, oh, so where did you get to? Oh, what got in the way of you getting there? And is there anything more that we can offer to help you, get back on track?
Right.
So they'll definitely keep things going along the line, and there will definitely be some legal requirements that are built into the contract of you said you would, and so you have to do this.
There it is. Yeah.
So there's that. And there's probably one other layer that's sitting slightly out to the side of your question, and that is that New Zealand is small. And people really, really forget how small New Zealand is. And so I really stress this with you for people going out there into the workforce. If you're a part of a project team that is saying that you're going to do something, you really want to be clear that you're doing it. Because if you don't, whoever is the funder they will know your face and they will know your name. And whenever any future application comes up, they will remember.
Mm,
This happens all the time in New Zealand, that funders go, nah, we're not going to deal with that organisation.
mm,
And so they don't even read stuff from certain information because of history that has been documented from the past.
So all about building honest rapport and stuff like that.
Yeah. So there's some real honesty and integrity that is essential for even project proposals. Yeah,
Mhm.
even before it's a contractual thing.
Right.
So it's a really good question.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Sorry, I just remembered it now.
That's okay.
All right. Catch you
Okay.
later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.